Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the first part of lecture. We're going to look at social understanding and how that continues to develop, as well as emotional understanding in this part. Let's take a look at self-concept and what happens here as we move through development. So we know in early childhood what happens is really define ourselves by what we see, what we can actually, our physical traits, right? The fact that I have blonde hair and blue eyes. We see a shift happening in mid-childhood. So what happens is we shift more to psychological traits and personality. So defining ourselves as I'm a funny person, I enjoy going to the movies, all of those things kind of come more about during mid-childhood. There's also more of a focus on competencies, what you can and can't do. I'm really good at reading. I'm really good at driving a car. I'm really bad at puzzles. All of those things are going to be embedded in self-concept in mid-childhood. And we also use social comparison a lot to have an understanding of who we are as a person. So how do I compare to this other person? How do I compare to this group of people? Am I a good driver? If I am, then I should be able to compare myself to a lot of other people and see that I'm driving better than them. Am I really great at math, let's say, if I was in middle school? I should be able to look at my grade and then compare it to other people to get some kind of self-concept of whether or not that is a true characteristic for me. So I'm using social comparison a lot during mid-childhood. It also shifts from a one-to-one comparison to the entire class. So maybe initially it might be if I was in early childhood, I might be building a tower next to somebody and I might think I'm really good at building towers. Mine's so much taller. But then that shifts in mid-childhood to, okay, I'm really good at this. Let's see if I'm really good compared to the entire class. I'm a really great dancer, let's say. Let's see if dance class, if I'm the best dancer, do I get an award? Do I get recognition? So I'm shifting my self-concept to a broader viewpoint. Something else happens during this time where we have this understanding of who we are ourselves, and then we are able to take into account how we're perceived by others. And when we take those two things together, we start getting this idea of our ideal self, of who we want to be, who we want to become. And that's going to play a part in our actions and how we behave. We're going to always be mindful of thinking, this is who I am, this is who I want to be. And that's a form of understanding who we are, understanding how we're perceived. Okay, moving forward, let's talk about self-esteem. Self-esteem has multiple aspects and how it's formed. We have 4 different methods or measurements of self-esteem in mid-childhood. Our academic measurement: are we good at math? Are we good at history? Are we a good student? We also have social competency. How many friends do we have? Are we popular? Are we engaged? Are we invited out to parties a lot? We have our physical athletic competencies. So are we somebody who is the football player or the captain of the cheerleading team? Are we really good at soccer? All of those things play into it. Are we picked last in PE or first in PE? And then our physical appearance. Do we feel like we're judged as attractive to other people in our peer group? Okay. All of those things play into self-esteem, and they still play into your self-esteem to this day, probably. Maybe not so much the physical athletic competence because it's less valuable after you get out of school, but they are elements of self-esteem. Differences in self-esteem we see in culture. Obviously, we're going to value different things in culture. We see that, when we think about whether or not we are individualistic or if we're more comprehensive as a society, what our goals are, collective or individualistic, that's going to be a measure of our self-esteem, whether or not providing to everybody or if we're just worried about ourselves. Gender has differences in self-esteem. Males are more likely to focus more on that kind of physical piece than girls are. They're more likely to lean into physical attractiveness. We have differences in ethnicity, obviously. When you're from different ethnicities, you might have differences in what you value in those categories. And child rearing practices also impact that. So thinking about what you've been taught to value from your parents is going to be a big part in how you view yourself. If you come from a family that is very involved in intellectual information, then your academic self-esteem is going to be very important. If your parents are professional basketball players, then your athletic self-esteem is going to be very important. Okay. Moving forward, let's talk a little bit about growth mindset and how that plays into self-esteem and our self-concept. Growth mindset really has to do with how we think about our abilities and our achievements. If you have a growth mindset, you believe that if you put in the effort, you put in the work, you're going to be able to achieve your goals. And if you were praising somebody to help them develop their growth mindset, you would place value on the work or the effort, not on the outcome. You worked really hard on that. That's why you did so well. I can see you're trying really hard. I like how you're not giving up. You're going to continue to get better if you keep trying. That's all growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. This idea that you're either something or you're not. For example, when we give feedback like you're so smart, you were able to figure that out because you are so clever. All of those things really place value on the skill and not how you've kind of accomplished the skill. And we have this idea that we can't change it very much. The importance with this is that typically there are differences on growth mindset. Obviously, we know that if you have a growth mindset, you're going to go on to be more successful because you're going to work through difficulties. You're going to challenge yourself more. We also see differences amongst gender. Girls are way more likely than boys to attribute achievements to abilities. We see differences with lower socioeconomic status because they are less likely to receive positive feedback in schools. We know that Asian parents are more likely to focus on effort and moral responsibility. So when we think about how we're praised for our actions and who we are, there are differences based on gender and ethnicity, and even socioeconomic status. All right. Last thing we're going to talk about when it comes to social identity, self-concept and self-esteem is learned helplessness. So this is something that can develop for children. It's the ability, it's when you attribute your success to external factors, but your failures to personal characteristics. This idea that if I had done really well on a math test, I would say, well, because the math test was really easy. But if I had done really poorly on that same math test, I might say something like, well, that's because I'm so stupid. So learned helplessness is a big thing, but there is something we can do about that. And that is called attribution retraining, where we teach children to view effort as a means to be successful. That goes back to growth mindset, right? This ability to think about your ability to be successful is all dependent on how much effort and work you are willing to put in. All right. Moving from self-concept and self-esteem, let's talk about emotional development. We see a lot of growth in this time period too in self-conscious emotions. We know that pride and guilt starts to be governed more by personality and who they think they are as a person and what they value. So if they have self-esteem in athletics, they're going to feel a lot of pride when they do well there. If they do something unkind, but they value that, they're going to have more guilt. They're more connected to specific behaviors. They're not these like really general things now. They have connections because they value different things stronger. The development of shame is more controlled by a break of standards. If they expect something of themselves and they've broken that, they're more likely to feel shame because of it. Pride provides motivation at this point in time. They want to feel that sense of pride, so they're going to be more motivated to engage in things that are going to deliver on that sense of pride. They also have a deeper level of emotional understanding. This is the point where they understand you can feel more than one thing at a time. So you could, for example, as an adult, get a job that requires you to move across the country, and you can feel really happy that you've gotten the job, but really sad that you're having to leave your friends. That's when this happens. The idea that I am allowed to feel both happy and mad, both happy and sad. It's not as simple as just one emotion all the time. We also see the understanding shift from outward or external circumstances to internal circumstances or states. If we ask somebody, why do you think that person is upset? They wouldn't look at the person necessarily and say, oh, it's because maybe they fell down. They would say something like, well, they're thinking about the fact that their dog is really sick. They understand that there's an internal thought process happening that's influencing the emotional expression. They also can understand that there's conflicting cues in a person's true feelings. So we think back to the early childhood kiddo who was going to the bathroom on the potty and the dad started to cry tears of joy. And the kid immediately went, oh no, dad's sad because he saw tears. That doesn't happen in mid-child anymore. There's a very clear understanding that you might be crying and that demonstrates sadness to me. But if your voice and your facial expression is showing me happy, I can kind of read through the mixed signals to identify what you're truly feeling. Okay. There's additional development, self-regulation, right? We're continuously working on this. We have different ways to approach it at this point in time. We have a problem-centered coping mechanism where we focus on the problem and the circumstances and think about how to address it in the future or change it to make it better. We have emotion-centered coping, which is more private and it really minimizes the distress we're feeling. This idea of like, okay, I didn't do really well on that math test, but it's okay because it was just one math test and it's not that big of a deal. I tried my best. That's emotion-centered. Problem-centered would be, okay, I didn't do very well on this math test. I need to go talk to the math teacher and see if he can give me extra credit. They typically also adjust their behaviors in response to others' thoughts and not fear of punishment. So they're not going to change their course of action because they're afraid of getting in trouble. They're more worried about what people think about them at this point in time. They also have a very clear understanding of their own self-efficacy when it comes to emotion. So emotional self-efficacy. So their understanding of their ability to control their emotions. This is when we get the idea of you might be really upset about something, and sometimes you're going to be able to keep that in, and sometimes it's going to come out. So if anybody's ever been somewhere and been really sad about something, but maybe it's not the best place to demonstrate those emotions, say you've had something horrific happen to you, but you have to go grocery shopping. you're able to hold that in, but maybe something happens that triggers a stronger emotion. You don't continue to grocery shop and cry. Typically, you have a self efficacy around controlling those emotions and you might leave. You understand how you feel and how to control them. It's much higher. All right, we're going to stop here. We'll come back and talk about moral development. I'll see you then.